right, welcome everyone. So today, as promised, let's do a small explanation and demonstration. What's a streaming API in the context of OpenAI APIs and how Flex Gateway can support them. So as we said, the short answer is yes, it can, but there are some caveats and let's check them. So first, we'll take OpenAPI as an example, but we'll actually use Gemini API. So first, what's the streaming? What does it mean to be a streaming API response in the context of OpenAI? As we can see in the description of the API, it is basically using the server sent events, right? The so-called SSEs. If we look at the definition in the Wikipedia, basically this is just a small addition of the HTTP protocol, right? So this is a specification accepted. So we'll be getting these kind of chunks across the HTTP protocol. And this is what we need to support technically in order to allow so-called streaming over HTTP. And then, of course, the client must be able to talk to the server, but that's the code that we write. And the question is whether the Flex Gateway as an API gateway, so as a proxy in between the client and the server, is able to allow this kind of communication. So at the moment, today, Flex Gateway technically can support it as an HTTP API. You will see the definition soon. And right, so you cannot manage this kind of WebSocket or SSE API yet. It's coming, maybe end of this year, but you can manage this connection as an HTTP API. All right, so let's do a short demonstration how it works and find some fine-tunings that we need to do. So what we're gonna do, I'll be using a Gemini API in the OpenAI compatibility mode because then I can use the OpenAI client and I can specify the URL. And this was important. So in the original Gemini SDKs, I cannot override this URL. In the OpenAI lib, I can. So as we can see, this API can work in several modes. This is just a regular text generation, right? I'm sending my prompt to this API, I'm getting my response, I'm printing my response. Now, if it's a streaming mode, there must be streaming here, right? So if I'm doing my prompt, sending my requests in a streaming mode, I'm receiving an iterator, kind of a response object in this case in Python is an iterator, and I'm iterating over the chunks of these kind of payloads, which I'm getting in my response. And I'm printing them, and we will see a demo soon. So with that, let's see a demo. Right, so here's a small Python code. It's basically the code which you saw here, just extended a little bit for the demo. So let's go over some key points, right? We are creating a client. It's currently configured to talk to Gemini API, right? System prompt, which is more or less nothing. Then my prompt will be here, and if it's a streaming, right, we'll be sending a streaming response with stream true. We'll be getting the response iterator, we'll iterate over the chunks, and here is some kind of pretty printing of the chunks to demonstrate you that it really does work. If it's a standard API call, we'll be just getting response without streaming, and we'll print the whole response all at once. So let's do a short demo. Currently, again, we are working without the Flex Gateway. We are calling the API directly. So standard demo, let's see what it does. Right, we are calling the API. And now as a user, if I'm implementing kind of a GPT UI-based application, I'm waiting for a response. So I typed my prompt. It's a lengthy one, right? So I specifically wrote something which would take time. And thus I need to wait. And that's my experience as a user without streaming. So as you could see, we waited 20 seconds, right? This is a response which Gemini Flash model generated. It's a big one, hence we waited a bit. So now let's see what's happening if I use the same prompt, but this time I call the API in a streaming mode. Right, let's kill that and go. So as you could see, I'm starting receiving chunks, and my experience as a user in a streaming mode talking to this API is more natural, right? I'm seeing like the LLM is generating constantly text, right? Of course, technically that's not what it is, but right, this is how I perceive it, and these are the benefits of using the streaming API. So in total, it's more or less the same time, but my experience as a user is much better. And this is also the reason why many developers or product people prefer using the streaming APIs for their GPT products, and this is the reason why we're checking the Flex Gateway. All right, so let's do it with the Flex Gateway. Let's stay with the streaming. What we do now, I'll switch to my local Flex Gateway running in my Docker container. It's right here. And let's check its configuration. So in Anypoint platform, if we are looking at the API definition, right, so under the base path Gemini API, right, I'm routing the request as an HTTP API, so to the Google API. So basically, right, this is the whole route. Hence, by calling this local URL, I will be redirected to here. So right to this one. And let's see if that works in a streaming mode. Maybe like a little bit of background, right? So technically why I think it should work, because Flex Gateway is based on Envoy, and Envoy does support all the modern HTTP protocol, and streaming in this case is nothing more than the use of the protocol. One fine-tuning that you will need to do is around the timeouts. And this actually correlates to the recent developments of new policies which you get with the Flex Gateway, the response timeout policy and the stream idle timeout policy. And now let's just demonstrate what they do. So currently, in terms of policies, I just have message logging enabled. So this is just a standard gateway. Nothing is configured. I'm using it as is. And let's go, right? Let's clean the console and shoot. So as we can see, the streaming started generating the chunks. So technically it's already working currently against the Flex Gateway. And as I said, it's just working, right? But here's the bummer. So after 15 seconds, the connection has been closed. And if I'm building an application and I'm proxying the request via Flex Gateway, this won't work, of course. And the reason is obviously the timeout, which is the default timeout in the Flex Gateway. And that's the response timeout. So the default response timeout is 15 seconds. And all you need to do if you want to make streaming working for you is basically to increase the response timeout to something more reasonable for having a conversation with a GPT. And nowadays, with the recent 1.9.0 version, we can do it by just configuring a policy. So response timeout, let's add it. I don't know, let's say I expect maximum conversation times of 90 seconds, so let's make it 90. As we can see, the policy is being directly applied in my local Flex Gateway. And done. Right, so now let's just retry the same request in a streaming mode. And right, so again, technically it's writing. Now the overall timeout of my kind of root conversation is 90 seconds or up to 90 seconds, meaning Flex Gateway will allow this HTTP connection to remain open, right? So as we see, it took 22 seconds, it completed, and it worked. So basically, this is it, right? So we just confirmed stream gateways do support, Flex gateways do support the kind of streaming mode of the APIs. We can do server sent events, we can do WebSockets. It's all a matter of timeout. So previously, you would have to configure the timeouts by using the so-called Envoy command headers, so the X headers. And nowadays is as easy as configuring a policy in the Flex Gateway, and that's what you get. Maybe one more word about So what is the stream idle timeout policy, and how, like, what does it have to do with the response timeout policy? Well, basically, even if we look at the definition in Envoy, there are many kinds of timeouts on our connection. There is a connection timeout, so the time it takes you to establish a connection. There is a stream, all kinds of stream timeouts, right? So once the events are being sent between the server and the client, they're being sent in chunks. And there is also a timeout. You can measure and control how much time does it take for the next chunk to be generated. And if it's not coming, right, then according to the protocol definition, the client can say, or the server can say, there are different ways to do this. They can say, okay, there is a timeout, so let's break this stream, right? And then there are ways to kind of to return to streaming. All of this is doable. There is also a root timeout, which is like the overall timeout. And I think this is what actually is being used for the response. I might be mistaken here, but I think what the response timeout in Flex Gateway is what Envoy is calling root timeout. And hence there was this limitation of 15 seconds. So now you can increase it, right? And a stream idle timeout, as we can see, it's the maximum duration for which a stream can remain idle, meaning the chunks which are being sent from the server to the client, right? This is a maximum duration which the protocol can allow for nothing happening in that stream connection. And then if nothing is happening, it will be disconnected. It's pretty generous. It's 300 seconds by default, meaning it can wait up to 5 minutes, which is a lot. But according to your company needs, you can configure it, of course. Basically, that's it. I guess that concludes the demo of right, how we can configure a Flex Gateway to work in streaming mode. It does work, no magic here. And the good news is that soon MuleSoft will also add additional features into Flex Gateway, which will support working with webhooks and server-sent events like in a more managed way. So you will be able to also manage this interface. And I'm really expecting this to come. Thank you for being there. Hope that was helpful and answered some questions, and see you next time.